it's Reija and welcome to another video. Today I am going to be sharing with you my November reading wrap-up. Let's get started. So I got into a bit of a reading slump during November. I wasn't really craving for physical books and reading in general. I was in a bit of a bad mental health headspace. So I actually listened to quite a bit of audiobooks in the start of November and non-fiction specifically because I kind of had that craving. I wasn't going to participate in non-fiction November, but it sort of kind of happened anyway. So the first book that I finished was The Five, The Untold Stories of the Women Killed by Jack the Ripper. And this was so good. I basically listened to it in like 2 days. I was gripped from start to finish. The author does an excellent job of building a chronological narrative. She uses like census data, letters, photos, archival information to build a chronological narrative of each of the victims' lives, and it works really well. She also gives a lot of like context for the times, like the fact that employment rates were going down, people who were normally like pretty well off had succumbed to poverty and stuff like that. It was really good, and the narration was done wonderfully. And yeah, I first heard about this book in Justine's channel. She did an excellent video review, which I will link down in the description for you to check out, because I think that she really summed up this book perfectly and got me interested in it, and I just echo all her thoughts. This was wonderful, and it kind of like the one thing that I really liked about it was the fact that it doesn't really go into Jack the Ripper. It doesn't go into the murders. Like, sure, the murders like play a part because that's the way these women's lives ended, unfortunately, but the author really gives a platform to the victims and like leaves the Ripper out of it, which I thought was really good. And like there are so many books and essays and documentaries and movies done about the Ripper, but not really any media that focuses on his victims. And I think that there's an issue of sort of glorifying the perpetrators instead of like pointing out that the people they have hurt and killed actually had lives of their own. And for that, this book does a marvelous job, and I gave it 5 stars, would highly recommend it. The next book I listened to was The Radium Girls, and I also listened to this one on audio, and once again, it took me roughly 2 to 3 days to finish it, and it was hard listening to this because if you are a very sensitive person and get squeaked out easily, this book might be too much for you, because I got super anxious listening to all the descriptions of tooth and bone and jaw decay and like teeth being like rotting out in people's like mouths and stuff. It really was a lot. But at the same time, I felt that it was necessary to sort of build the picture of what these women went through. So the Radium Girls, I have wanted to know more about the Radium Girls ever since I read The Only Harmless Great Thing by Brooke Bolander, which is a short story that I really loved. And I had never really heard of the Radium Girls before. I know that it's a very well-known thing that happened, and it was basically one of the first like class action lawsuits and stuff, and kind of because these women fought for their rights and fought for compensation, they actually their struggle resulted in better working conditions and people knowing more about the effects of radium and safety measures being put into place for industrial workers. So it was a huge like victory and milestone. But that doesn't erase the fact that these women, like most of them, died and died horribly and in pain. And these companies were covering the stuff up, and it was a very hard but eye-opening thing to read. And once again, there was like a good amount of like census data and stuff used, and the author interviewed a lot of the relatives and still living workers. And yeah, this was also a 5-star read. It was tough, but it also was very educational, and I feel like I had a very good and thorough picture of the events that went on, and I can't believe that there was a time when people thought that radium was a cure-all and actually thought that ingesting it was a good idea. But highly enjoyable. I'm actually thinking of getting my own physical copies of both the 5 and the Radium Girls, because I feel like if I want to reread these at some point, I want to read them in the physical, because then I can look at the source list and the appendixes at the end of the book, because that's the trouble with listening to nonfiction on audio, is that you don't get the list of sources that the author has used. So it becomes a chore to sort of fact check and double check information, because you have to go out of your way to find that stuff online. But yeah, highly recommend both of these books, and I gave both of them 5 stars. The last non-fiction book that I read in the month of November was From Here to Eternity by Caitlyn Doughty, and I have to say that I did not like this as much as I liked her debut, Smoke Gets in Your Eyes. I gave this one 3 stars. I thought that it talks about interesting topics. Caitlyn Doughty basically goes around the world and gets to know various death practices and cultural practices in the places that she visits. She goes to Japan, she goes to Peru and Spain and such, and each of the places that she visits, she kind of relates the cultural experience and the things that she learns back to the death practices in the United States. And I feel like my issue with this is probably to do with the fact that I am not an American. In Finland we have very different death practices. I will say that one thing that I really enjoyed about this book was that it made me go and look up what kind of death practices there are in Finland. And for example, we don't embalm. Anyway, we don't do that at all. If you want your loved one to be cremated, cats. If you want your loved one to be cremated, they have to be cremated in a wood like coffin, because that will make the oven put out more heat or something. Like there are interesting things that I learned, mostly because one of my friends works at a cemetery during summer, so it was interesting to. I basically just rounded them up and asked them all my questions and they answered, and yeah. Anyway, this was a tangent. My issue with this book was that it felt like death tourism in a way, like Caitlyn, Doughty going to all these places, and like I don't know. This book made me a little uncomfortable. It made me like feel like these, like her lens with which she viewed the cultures is like, I don't know how to explain it. It just felt kind of icky to me. Like, I gave this book 3 stars because I think the subject matter is important and I liked Caitlyn Doughty's narration, but I couldn't help, especially when she visits Peru and Indonesia, I couldn't help getting the idea that she's there to consume the culture, you know? Like, not to really be a part of it, but these people are like entertainment to her. And I know that that's not her intent. I feel like that's not her intent, but it kind of comes across that way to me, and that made me really uncomfortable. So I couldn't justify giving this book a higher rating because of my own personal level of uncomfortableness. I could not fully enjoy it. So make of that what you will, and be prepared that there is that aspect to it. Moving on to fiction reads. First, I finally read The Tea Dragon Society by Katie O'Neill, and I gave this 5 stars. It was wonderful, it was wholesome, it was inclusive, the art is amazing, and the book deals with like surprisingly hard-hitting themes. It deals with themes like the passing down of ritual and the passing down of craftsmanship, so that you can preserve these basically niche traditions that are dying out because of like industrialization and stuff, and people becoming busier and not having the time to dedicate to learning and mastering these crafts. And it talks about disability, it talks about like friendship and including people, and it talks about community, and I loved it. The art is beautiful. Basically what you see in the cover is what you get inside. It's such a lovely read, and I really want to know more about this world because there are some interesting world building details in this book that I feel could be expanded upon in like future installments if the author feels like doing so. And my final read for the month was Assassin's Quest by Rubenhold, and this was pretty much with the Tea Dragon Society. These were the only 2 things that I managed to read for the one readathon. This is over 800 pages. It took me the whole week to get through this, and I have to say that I really liked it. Royal Assassin is still my favorite book in the Farseer trilogy, but this eclipses the first one. It's basically, this book strips down Fitz of everything he knows, everything he's used to, and then builds him up again. It's also very like metaphysical and philosophical in a way. It talks about like personhood, what makes up a person, and also like how people are basically a collection of like memories and experiences, and everything else is sort of just a frame that holds us together. And yeah, it's so hard to explain what goes on in this book, because so much goes on in this book. Like, Rubenhold really packs so much world building, characterization, and tragedy in this one work, and it was wonderful. I will say that there were bits that dragged on, like Fitz's journey from Buck to the mountains takes up so long, and it's so cumbersome to read at points. And also, I think the last bit, like, more time should have been dedicated to the last, let's say, 100 pages. I think that maybe adding 100 pages to the end to sort of flesh those scenes out would have been better, because I feel like it takes such a long time to get to the point, and then the end sort of becomes a checklist effect and a list of things that happened, which was a little disappointing. But overall, I gave this book 4 stars, really enjoyed it, and I really now feel the need to continue on in the series. Like, I feel like now I know what the fuss is about, and I know what to expect, and I know I want to read more of these characters and know more about this world. So, can't wait. And there you have it. Those are all the books that I read in the month of November. Tell me in the comments if you have read any of these books, what did you think about them, and did you like any of them, or are you interested in picking up any of them? And I will see you in the next video very soon. Bye bye!